If there's one thing that you could change about Beverly Heights, what would it be?
I think that this is endemic of not just Beverly Heights Church, but the church, and particularly evangelicalism. For most of Rick's ministry, and it was true of Beverly Heights Church, and it was true of the evangelicals within the Peace USA and evangelicalism in general, Rick's efforts and the efforts of those like him were trying to preserve something from being lost. They saw that the evangelical church was on the coach of the mainline denomination in the Peace USA, and that coach was running away, and it was heading towards a cliff. And Rick and others did the appropriate thing, where they tried to grab on the reins and pull back. Yeah. Let's not go over the cliff. COVID accelerated a lot of things. We're no longer on the edge of the cliff. We're over the cliff. That might be a hard thing to recognize and an even harder thing to accept. When you're over the cliff, you have to think about how you're going to stick the landing. How are we going to land? Yeah. And so the way in which we think about what we're doing and how we're doing it has to begin to adjust.
Does that imply a tweaking of the gathered, scattered, a model that we've pursued for a long time?
Yeah, so this is a conversation I've actually had with Rick, too, is that, and Peter was actually quite illuminating for me, some things that he was saying that was helping some of these things to connect and click for me. The gathered, scattered vision is fantastic. I think we are going to continue with that as the vision for our church. But for 50 years, all through Rick's ministry and prior to that, there was an assumption of the gathered. For a long time, it was part of the culture. It was part of the zeitgeist. Mostly Christians are going to gather. Yeah. That's a given.
They get that.
Yeah. COVID, you can't assume that after COVID.
You can't assume
anymore.
that now.
The gathered dimension can no longer be taken for granted. Scattering happens. Now we can assume people are going to be scattered. What we have to work toward is make sure that they are a particular kind of people. They are the church in that scattered dimension, and they become a particular kind of person in that dimension because of what happens in the gathered dimension. And a greater emphasis, I think, in the future is going to be towards that gathering side. That's why I use the language of localism. I'm a localist.
Right.
And part of that has to do with a reorienting or a regathering and a re-strengthening of the church as gathered so that it can do and be what it's called to do and to be in the scattered dimension. Okay. All of that it's a shift of perspective. We're not leaving anything, we're not changing anything, but we're shifting the way that we're looking at it so that we're doing things slightly differently. I believe that we have to move in that direction. If we don't move in that direction, we will not stick the landing. Yeah. We have to stick the landing. I think you can apply that to, again, worship. Most people at least recognize that Sunday morning is a time when you probably should get up and go to church. Now, Sunday morning is maybe you go to church, or maybe you go online, or maybe you just don't go. You might excuse that kind of thinking for the unbelieving world, but Christians believe that. People who would count themselves as among the faithful would say, and to go back to an earlier question,
right.
Just staying online is a faithful option. I think there was a provisional faithfulness where that was true when we were shut down and nobody knew what was going on. And thank God we had the live stream so that we could make that available.
The Wall Street Journal story I mentioned earlier went into great length about churches that are trying to model, the virtual gathering as something more permanent.
They're leaning into that as something we should be doing.
Well, let me say this first. I think that COVID can be viewed as God's grace to the church.
Right.
With regard to virtual church, I've not done lexical studies, let's say, on the word virtual.
Yeah.
But I think throughout the history of the church, we've had a problem with virtual church. There's virtual church and there's real church. That doesn't have so much to do with whether you stay home for worship or not. There are plenty of people that fill the pews of the world's churches and Beverly Heights as well, that are in church every Sunday morning and they're practicing virtual church. It's not real church.
Right.
Many have extolled the virtues of the gathered and scattered vision. That's not virtual. That's what the church is.
Right.
And to the extent that the Church of Jesus Christ at Beverly Heights or any place else is not living into the reality of being gathered and scattered, then you may be wearing the Beverly Heights t-shirt, but you're not the church.
Yeah.
COVID, is in some respects God's grace that has shaken us and caused us to realize we're not all that the Lord Jesus had in mind.
Right.
We've got to get on the ball here.
Yeah.
Going to church on Sunday morning is not worship. That's not worship.
Right.
Sitting and singing a hymn in the pew is not worship. If I'm not saying in my heart as I sing that, Lord, you are a mighty fortress. You are a bulwark who has never failed me. Now you're getting down to it. Now you're doing some worship there. I think the vision remains the same because the vision really is just a statement of what the church is. Mm-hmm. But it's a matter of moving from virtual church to the really being the church. Now, recognizing that there are some individuals who, because of their own life situations, cannot gather with the people of God. I think that there are special aspects of pastoral care that we provide for them, and I think that the live stream is one of those. I don't think we take that away from them.
Yeah.
I think we challenge the others to say this is not an acceptable option for you because you're able to get up.
What about the question I asked earlier? Anything you'd like to change about Beverly Heights?
It's not a change in process or procedure. It's a prayer for the transformation of our lives, our personal, our corporate lives. And that is that by God's Spirit we might be able to love one another more. I've tried to define, or I have defined, love to the congregation over the years as me dying to myself, and all that dying to myself might mean, in order that the object of my love might thrive.
Right.
Yeah. When you do something that I disagree with, or something that hurts me, those kinds of things, rather than saying you are dead to me, you are anathema to me. This kind of borders, I guess, on my own views with regard to people who have left Beverly Heights over disagreements, so they think with Nate, but it's really disagreements with the decisions of the leadership. I want to say to them, have you, in fact, before God, arms open, hands empty, knees bowed, said to the Lord, help me to do what you want me to do vis-a-vis, let's say, Nate's decision about whatever?
When I hear you describe the necessity of anti-virtual church in your heart, right? That you're not just filling the pews and singing songs, but that there's a true connection with the Lord, a submission to Him. Your heart is bowed along with your body. It's illuminating and a good reminder because I grew up with the sort of ever more vacant narration of that, meaning, well, the church isn't four walls. Therefore, the supermarket, I'm worshiping God when I shop. Therefore, whenever I'm taking a shower or I'm eating, and that's like, whether you eat or drink, whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Of course, that is biblical, but it's not less than the gathering together of God's people on the Sabbath to worship. I kind of grew up with a bumper sticker faith in some ways of, yes, well, of course, the church is not simply a building, and the church is not simply the rote ritualization of us gathering as people, but I'm not sure it can be, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure it can be less than that. What would I change? I think my simple I recognize this is this involves a lot of different things like space and timing and things. I would have one service. I would get rid of the division of the two services. And I know there's a history behind that, and there are some really good things about it, but I long for that to be possible, to have gathered all of us together every week as one
Body.